The knock came at 6 on the dot. Not 6:02, not 5:59. 6 exactly. The way authority likes to announce itself clean, punctual, and already convinced it's right. I was awake before it came. Sleep doesn't stay deep once you've lived long enough to understand how much can change while you're still. The house had been breathing around me all night, doing the small honest work it's done for decades. Pipes ticking as the temperature shifted. The refrigerator's low, steady hum, like a throat clearing before speech. The wall clock stepping forward 1 second at a time, patient and stubborn, as if time itself had decided to keep going whether anyone asked it to or not. Rain tapped the gutters in thin, even fingers. Salem rain. Gray, polite, relentless. The kind of rain that doesn't shout or flood, but soaks you anyway, slowly enough that you don't notice until you're cold clear through. When the knock came again, just once more, harder, I took my time standing, not out of defiance, out of habit. I've learned that rushing rarely improves a situation, and it almost always gives the other person more ground than they deserve. The floor creaked under my feet in 3 familiar places as I crossed the hall. I know every sound this house makes. I know which boards complain and which stay quiet. I know which hinges need a touch of oil and which only squeak if you rush them. The house talks if you've lived with it long enough. It tells you what it needs and when. I opened the door. My son stood there with his shoulders squared and his jaw already set, rain darkening the shoulders of his jacket. His shoes were clean. His hair was dry. He looked like a man who'd practiced what he was about to say in the car. Maybe twice, maybe more, until it felt smooth enough to deliver without thinking. He didn't say my name. He didn't say good morning, pay rent or get out. He said, that was it. No warm-up, no hesitation, just the sentence, flat and finished, like a receipt being torn off and handed over. For a moment, I didn't answer, not because I was stunned, but because words have weight. And I wanted to feel exactly how heavy that one was before I let it pass through me. Behind me, the house stood quiet. The hallway held its breath. The banister waited under my hand, worn smooth from decades of palms sliding over it without thinking. I'll rent it to someone who pays, he continued. An old man living here for free isn't useful. I'm not bleeding money for a dead weight. Useless, dead weight. Those words didn't land in my ears first. They landed in my chest, heavy and dull, the way a poorly swung board hits you. Not sharp enough to cut, but hard enough to bruise deep. This was the Salem house. The one I framed when my hands were stronger and my back didn't argue with me every morning. The one where I measured twice and cut once because mistakes show later, even if no one notices them at the start. The one where my wife stood in the doorway with sawdust in her hair and laughed when the shelves leaned a little because they were still holding. He stepped past me like permission was implied. In the kitchen, the air smelled faintly of cold coffee and yesterday's rain carried in on coats. He didn't sit. He didn't need to. He slid a folded sheet of paper across the table toward me the way banks slide notices, careful not to touch you more than necessary. That's the number, he said. Market rate. If you want to keep living here, you pay. Otherwise, you're out by the weekend. I already have interest. I took the chair by the window. The glass was cold against my shoulder. Outside, the maple tree shed rain 1 drop at a time, each bead forming, falling and disappearing into the soil without complaint, patient, consistent, certain of where it belonged. Say it again, I told him, keeping my voice even, so I know I heard you right. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just irritation dressed up as confidence. "Stop playing owner, Jacob," he said. "You live here because I allow it." That sentence did something different. The first words hurt. This one clarified. I looked at him then. Not the way a father looks at a child, but the way a builder looks at a wall that's been altered without permission. I noticed the way his foot tapped impatiently, the way his thumb kept flicking his phone, the way he was already somewhere else, already arranging a future that didn't include me in it. He wanted noise. He wanted anger. He wanted something he could point to later and call proof. I gave him none of it. "You finished?" I asked. "For now," he said, pushing back his chair. "Rent or keys? Your choice." He left the paper behind like a summons and walked down the hall. His footsteps loud and fast, unfamiliar in a house that prefers steady movement. The door shut harder than necessary. Then the house swallowed the sound and settled again. The quiet afterward wasn't empty. It filled with the sounds I knew by heart, the refrigerator's low breath, the faint rattle of the windows when the wind shifted, the clock clicking forward, refusing to stop just because something ugly had been said. I stood there longer than I needed to. Let my breathing slow. Let the shaking in my chest ease. My wife once told me, "Don't let anyone push you out of the home you built." At the time, she meant death or time, or the slow forgetting that comes when people stop asking how you did things. She never imagined it would be our son standing at the door with a ledger and a threat. I rested my hand on the banister, feeling the shallow groove my palm had burned into it years ago with sandpaper and work. My hand made this, I thought, and I won't leave it confused about who I am. People think old men are done planning. They think once your hair thins and your knees complain, you're supposed to live only in memory, retelling stories, shrinking your footprint, slowly handing things over without asking too many questions. They mistake stillness for surrender. They mistake patience for confusion. I've learned patience the hard way. Patience is what you develop when you build something that takes years to show whether you were right or wrong. When you pour foundations you won't stand on for months. When you raise walls knowing you won't see how they hold until storms arrive that no one can predict. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after my son left, not frozen, just listening. The house always tells you what it needs if you don't rush past it. The fridge hummed, the clock ticked, the rain kept up its soft argument with the gutters. The folded paper lay on the table where he'd left it. I didn't touch it. Paper is patient. It doesn't need immediate attention. It waits. I moved through the house slowly, the way you do when you're counting something important without numbers. Past the photographs I didn't look at because I didn't need to. Past the door that sticks in damp weather and always has. My shoulder found the ankle without thinking. The garage smelled the way it always did. Old paint and time. Honest smells. Useful smells. Tools hung on the pegboard where I'd left them, each one framed by its own shadow, the outlines worn smooth by years of returning things to where they belong. The stool leaned left, the way it always had. I never fixed that leg. I liked knowing where the imbalance lived. Some people call it neglect. I call it awareness. The safe sat against the back wall, pink-necked, dull, unremarkable, not hidden. Just uninteresting to anyone who doesn't know what weight feels like when it matters. I set my palm on the metal. It pulled the heat out of me and left something steadier behind. Inside were papers, not threats, not tricks, just records, The deed lay flat under the workbench light. Salem address. My name first. An 80-20 split that had been discussed, documented, and recorded long before anyone imagined using words like freeloader or useless. The occupancy clause was there in plain language. My right to live here, written down, filed, and acknowledged by people whose job it is to remember facts when emotions start lying. I ran my finger along the page, not sentimentally, just carefully. Builders respect documents the way they respect measurements. Not because they're sacred, but because mistakes compound. I made copies, clean ones, crisp edges. One went into a rigid sleeve. One into a folder marked for a place that wasn't this house, not yet. Then I closed the safe and didn't open it again right away. Instead, I went back inside and chose a manila envelope, thick enough to feel important. I printed a single line across the front in block letters, slow and deliberate. Property transfer, final. I didn't seal it. I didn't sign anything. I placed it slightly crooked on the hallway table where a restless eye would trip over it. Bait isn't about color. It's about placement. Back in the garage, I opened a small plastic case and took out two pinhole cameras. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy, quiet tools. One for the porch eave, one for the garage rafters. I climbed the ladder, planting my feet carefully. The ladder and I had an agreement. I wouldn't rush, and it wouldn't betray me. The porch unit nested in shadow above the doorbell, angled just enough to see faces, hands, and intentions. The garage camera watched the path from driveway to side door, where people forget they're being seen. I tethered both to the router, changed the default passwords, routed the feeds to an off-site vault I'd paid for every month without thinking much about it, until now. Motion alerts on, audio on, timestamps burned into every frame. People behave differently when they think no one is watching. They behave honestly. I snapped a photo of the deed copy with my phone and called Martin. He answered on the second ring. "You got a minute?" I asked. "For you, always." I told him everything without raising my voice. The rent demand, the eviction talk, the rental threats dressed up as responsibility. "You still have the capacity evaluation?" he asked. "Notarized, sealed, December." "Good." He said, if he even gestures toward guardianship, it dies in the lobby. We talked through contingencies the way carpenters talk through load-bearing walls, quietly, precisely, without drama. He drafted a cease and desist while I listened to the rain change tempo on the roof. When the call ended, the house felt fuller, not louder, just steadier. By mid-morning, the doorbell rang. A man in a blazer stood on the porch with a clipboard and a measuring wheel, smiling like the weather. "Here for the appraisal," he said. "For what?" I asked through the cracked door. He read my address. Behind me, footsteps. My son appeared with that practiced smile, already smoothing the air. "Just getting numbers," he said. "Market check." The appraiser's eyes flicked between us. He handed me a card and retreated back into the rain, uncertainty trailing him like damp fabric. My son didn't look at me. "It's smart to know what a place can fetch," he said, tapping his phone. "People pay for space. People also need the legal right to lease it," I said. He snorted. "Legal is paperwork. Paperwork gets signed." Not all of it, I thought. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, the envelope waited. And somewhere between those two facts, the house began to understand that something was being tested. By afternoon, the rain had learned a harder rhythm. Not angry, just persistent. The kind that doesn't pound, but insists, each drop stitching the sky to the ground one thread at a time. Salem wore grey well. It always had. Grey hides things long enough for them to reveal themselves on their own. I sat in the living room with a mug I hadn't reheated, watching the light change on the walls. This house holds light the way people hold breath carefully, never wasting it. I didn't touch the paper on the table. I didn't move the envelope. I let things be where they were. Rushing is a form of fear, and I wasn't afraid. My phone buzzed once, then again. Motion detected, front door. Motion detected, garage. I didn't jump. I didn't curse. I didn't feel surprise. I felt confirmation. I stood, slow and deliberate, and went to the small desk in the hallway where the light was better. The manila envelope still sat there, slightly crooked, doing its quiet work. I turned it just a hair more, enough to catch the eye of anyone passing too quickly. Then I picked up my coat and keys. I didn't confront anyone. I drove into town and parked where I could sit without being seen, the way you do when you're checking whether a beam is straight from a distance. My phone rested in my hand, screen glowing softly under my thumb. The porch camera came up first. A slice of wet concrete, the edge of the doorframe. Then a shoulder entered the frame. Dark jacket, purposeful movement. The man knelt, laying out tools with a practiced calm. Picks arranged neatly on a cloth like silver fish set out to dry. He worked without hurry. He'd done this before, many times. The timestamp burned white in the corner. 2:13 p.m. The garage feed pulsed to life. Headlights washed across the driveway, bleeding light into the shadows. A familiar truck rolled into frame and stopped just short of the garage door. My son stepped out first, phone in hand, confidence already in motion. A woman followed, clipboard tucked under her arm, smile ready, but not yet engaged. Behind her, a young couple climbed out slower, careful not to look like they were imagining themselves inside already. "Change it," my son said, his voice clean and sharp through the audio feed. "He won't be back till Friday." That sentence landed differently than the rest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't impatience. It was planning. The locksmith hesitated just a fraction, fingers pausing above the deadbolt. The woman with the clipboard glanced around, cataloging the yard, the porch, the way the house sat on the lot like it belonged there. 3 bedrooms, 2 bath, she said brightly, turning to the couple. South Salem. Great light. Big yard. People pay for light. She would say later. People pay for rights. I thought now. Across the street, movement. Reed came into frame with his old shepherd tugging at the leash, nose low to the ground like it was reading the rain. Reed stopped when he saw the group. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He adjusted his cap and walked up the porch steps with the unhurried confidence of a man who knows exactly where he stands. "Afternoon," he said evenly. "Coroner says no entry without him." The locksmith straightened. "Coroner." My son's smile slipped. "Not all at once, but enough." "Mind your business," he snapped. "This is my property." Reed didn't raise his voice. "It's called being a neighbor." The locksmith glanced up at the porch eave. The tiny black eye of the camera stared back without blinking. "You the only owner?" the locksmith asked. "I'm the one who matters," my son said. "Do the door." We've got a showing." The couple shifted. The woman's smile thinned. This wasn't the clean transaction she'd imagined. "You live here because I allow it," my son said again, louder this time, "for the benefit of everyone. Or maybe himself." The words echoed in the mic. The locksmith stepped back, not without all owners present. "I'm not getting sued today." The woman cleared her throat. "We can reschedule," she said quickly, already shepherding the couple down the steps. "We'll be in touch." My son reached for the garage handle. It didn't give. The camera caught his face in that moment. Surprise, then calculation, then irritation when he realized how few keys he actually held. He struck the door once with the flat of his palm. Hard enough to be heard, not hard enough to change anything. Across the street, Reed stood still, rain darkening his hat, Shepherd shaking water from its coat. "You're on record," Reed said quietly. "Audio 2. Silence followed, not empty silence, weighted silence, the kind that settles when everyone understands something has shifted. I tapped the screen and tagged the footage. A small red mark appeared on the timeline. Evidence doesn't argue. It remembers. I leaned back in the seat and watched the rain stitch the world together, thin and constant. My phone held a patient archive of intent exposed to daylight. For the first time that day, I allowed myself a breath that went all the way down. This wasn't victory. This was alignment. Truth hadn't rushed. It had simply waited for someone to forget they were being seen. The knock the next morning was different, measured, even professional. Not the knock of someone demanding entry. Not the knock of someone rehearsing a speech. This knock carried the calm weight of process, the sound of things being handled properly whether anyone liked it or not. I opened the door to Martin standing there with rain still clinging to the shoulders of his coat and a leather case that looked heavier than paper ever should. He didn't rush inside. He waited for me to step back first. That mattered. Manners aren't decoration, they're signals. My son was already at the table, arms crossed, chin lifted. He had chosen the seat that faced the door, the way people do when they want to feel in control of arrivals and exits. He didn't stand when Martin entered. He didn't need to. He believed he was still ahead of things. "Morning," Martin said pleasantly, setting the case down. "Shall we begin?" My son smirked. Finally, someone competent. Martin didn't react. He never reacts to bait. He opened the case and laid out a small, tidy stack of papers. No flourish, no drama, just order. "Let's start with what you threatened," Martin said, turning the first page so we could all see the heading. "Cognitive Capacity Evaluation, Dr. Alan Pierce. Notarized, filed December. Jacob is fully competent to manage his affairs," Martin read calmly. "Any petition for guardianship would be dismissed on contact." My son opened his mouth, then closed it again. A small thing, but small shifts matter. "Next," Martin said, sliding the evaluation aside. The deed followed, clear sleeve, Salem address, ownership split, my name first. Occupancy rights recorded plainly, without emotion or commentary. No advertising, leasing, lock changes, or rent collection from a co-owner in possession without unanimous consent, Martin said. "This is not interpretation. This is fact." My son laughed once, short and sharp. "Paper." I lined drawers with paper. Martin nodded. "Of course you do." He opened his laptop. The porch footage filled the screen. Rain. Locksmith's hands. tools laid out carefully. Audio clean. Change it, my son's voice said from the speakers. He won't be back till Friday. Martin paused the video on the timestamp glowing in the corner like a nail driven home. Then the garage feed played. Headlights, the rental agent. The young couple shifting uncomfortably. Reed stepping forward, steady as gravity. Co-owner says no entry without him. The locksmith backing away. The agent retreating. My son striking the garage door. Martin closed the laptop gently. We also have neighbor testimony, he said, and offsite backups. For the first time, my son's confidence didn't bounce back. It sat there, thin and strained, like a board cut just short of the mark. This is harassment, he said finally. This is record, Martin replied. He slid forward another document. Instrument 1. He said, Protective Occupancy Trust. He explained it slowly. Not for my benefit. I already knew. But so there would be no confusion. Jacob retains exclusive right to occupy this residence for life. No sale, lease, encumbrance, or access modification without trustee consent. I serve as trustee. He slid the pen toward me. I signed. The sound was small, final, like a lock turning. Instrument 2. Martin continued. Revocation of all prior powers of attorney. Another signature. My son leaned forward, jaw tight. You think this boxes me out? Martin met his eyes evenly. The law already has. There was a silence then. Not hostile, not loud. Just the kind that arrives when a story someone's been telling themselves stops working. I cleared my throat. There's one more thing, I said. Martin opened the second envelope I'd asked him to bring. For years, I said, keeping my voice steady. I set money aside, quietly. I intended it for you someday. My son leaned forward, hunger flashing briefly across his face. I changed my mind. Martin explained the donor-advised fund in my wife's name, trades, scholarships, elder support. This is punishment, my son spat. No, I said softly. It's correction. The pen returned to my hand. I signed. The house hummed around us, the fridge's low breath. The clock ticking forward, faithful and unafraid. When Martin stood, the meeting was already over. We'll record and file this afternoon, he said. Any further attempts will be addressed formally. Reed tipped his cap from the doorway. I'm across the street, he said. My son didn't speak again. He didn't need to. The house changed its sound after he left. Not immediately. Houses don't panic. They wait. But by evening, the air had loosened. The floor stopped creaking where they didn't need to. Even the clock seemed to tick with less insistence, like it trusted the night to arrive on its own. I stood in the doorway and watched my son walk down the drive without turning back. He didn't slam the door. He didn't say goodbye. He simply took what he still believed belonged to him, his version of the story, and carried it elsewhere. I closed the door behind him. The latch caught clean. I leaned my forehead against the wood for a moment, not in grief, not in relief, but in recognition. Some endings aren't loud enough to deserve tears. They ask only to be acknowledged. Later, I walked the rooms. I touched the mantel where my wife used to line up birthday cards before she ever opened them. I adjusted the photograph that always leaned left because the frame was warped. I replaced a burned-out bulb in the hallway and felt absurdly proud of the way the light filled the space afterward. Control, I've learned, isn't domination. It's stewardship. The camera stayed, not because I was afraid, but because memory deserves a witness. Reed waved from across the street, as he always had, and I waved back with the same hand I'd waved with for 20 years. That continuity mattered more than apology ever could. A week later, a letter arrived confirming the trust recording. Another confirmed the fund. Another thanked me on behalf of a student I would never meet. I placed them in a drawer and closed it gently. People think dignity is loud, that it announces itself, demands recognition. It doesn't. Dignity is quiet work done consistently. It's knowing when to say no and meaning it long enough for the world to hear you. One evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea that stayed hot because I drank it slowly. The rain returned, lighter this time. The shepherd lay at Reed's feet across the street, older now, content with the weight of the ground. This house had held arguments, laughter, grief, and hope without ever asking to be repaid. It had waited for me to understand that love without boundaries is just surrender wearing kindness like a mask. I didn't hate my son. I didn't forgive him either. I released him from the center of my life and placed him where he belonged, outside the walls that required care. The night deepened. The porch light glowed. The lock held. And for the first time in a long while, I slept without rehearsing tomorrow. Some inherit property. Some inherit power. I chose something harder. I chose peace.